Hey, yo. What's up, everybody? My name is Jeremy Schumacher. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm the Jer in Wellness with Jer. Thanks for stopping by and checking out my channel today. I was just outside. It's really bright out, and there's snow, and everything's bright and reflective. And I have little blue eyes, and they're so light sensitive, and it's so dark here in my basement. So if I'm squinting, it's because I've been blinded by the snow. Today I'm going to be fully hyperbolic. For those of you who weren't raised by English teachers, that means I'm going to speak with a lot of hyperbole, which is exaggeration for effect. No, this is a response to something I've seen in different therapy circles, and certainly I think in some communication in the wider internet that I've seen, a reckoning, an awareness, a pushback on the podcast, The Necessary Conversation. For those of you who are unfamiliar, if it hasn't found your way to your algorithm, I'm so sorry for bringing it up to whatever device is listening to your other devices, because now it's going to start showing up in your algorithm. They have great SEO. Good job. The Necessary Conversation is a podcast where two adult siblings, Chad and Haley, couldn't think of a way to place their birth between the 80s and 90s other than to have siblings named Chad and Haley. Chad and Haley are full-grown adults, probably elder geriatric millennials or young Gen Xers, sort of that little bit of mid-ground there. And they're mega parents who live in Oklahoma. And I think there's a lot of novelty around the podcast. And I think for a lot of people who are dealing with estrangement in their family and understanding what healthy boundaries look like for the first time, they found the podcast interesting and validating in a lot of cases. And I think the podcast is actually quite harmful, especially in its current iteration. So let's talk about that. I, as a family therapist, cannot diagnose people who are not my clients. I am not in a position to throw shade at people who are making money in late stage capitalism, because it's tough out there. So if you hit on something that goes viral and then you're stuck doing it because it is what pays the bills, I feel for that. I understand some of that. And there's things that I don't know about these people. I haven't talked to these people. This is just sort of an off the cuff response to what I've seen other people, other therapists talk about, and what I see based on my own social media algorithm, where this podcast is recommended to me constantly. And every clip I watch, I am sort of horrified that it exists. Because again, it's an interesting concept that's actually done quite poorly. So let's dive in. Much love and respect to all these other humans. Certainly not their ideas and certainly not their approaches. But this isn't a personal attack. This isn't anything beyond a bit of a structural analysis on what I, as a family therapist, see when I watch stuff like this, and where I think it exists in the media landscape, and why. Because this is not an anomaly. I used to not be able to say anemone when I was a kid. Now I'm stumbling over everything, because in my head I was just like, well, that's not gonna be good. I'm sure it'll get clipped as evidence that I'm not a good public speaker. This is evidence that I don't really edit much of anything. I'm used to doing therapy, which is live and you just talk. So that's what most of my media is supposed to feel like. Yeah. So The Necessary Conversation, two grown children talking to their mega parents. In theory, this is a good idea, right? Chad and Haley, the adult children, talk about how they were basically estranged from their parents. They really weren't talking much. And so the podcast created a structured environment where they could have a relationship with their parents. They had time set aside each week to talk to their parents that they otherwise wouldn't have without the podcast, without the structure, because they're not friends. They don't see the world the same way. And I'm really not opposed to that, other than I think it's weird to do as a podcast. And hey, you're probably watching this on YouTube. I would love to not do this. Right? Like I can't describe how much I would love a world in which Joe Rogan wasn't a thought leader. How young, especially boys and young men, are not being driven towards right-wing media by factors outside of their control. The algorithms and the tech bro oligarchs who manipulate the algorithm to make sure that they can keep making money. I would love for the internet to have been sort of the ultimate expression of democracy, which was unlimited information for all people, with some sense of like equity to that. But that's not what the internet is. The internet is just another tool for the capitalist ruling class to limit and nudge and shape what they want public discourse to look like. And so, part of my podcast is I'm a small business owner. It's somewhat marketing, but a lot of my podcast and YouTube channel is there's a lot of bad information out on the internet. And if 5 people see my stuff instead of Rogan's stuff, if 50 people watch a video of mine, and that means some of them aren't watching Jordan Peterson, like that's a win. I'm not monetized. This isn't my full-time profession. I have a full-time profession where I help people directly. And the number of people I can see in a week, 15 cases, I work with families and polycules and romantic relationships and different dynamics. So I see more than 15 people a week, but about 15 sessions is where I cap my schedule. And so in a day, hundreds of people can see my content online, and I cannot see that many people during the week. So obviously working one-on-one with a therapist is much more beneficial than watching YouTube. And there are people who are neither going to therapy nor watching good, validated information from like reliable sources on the internet. So here I am as a response to some of the shit online. So again, when I say, I don't know that recording your family dynamics for content is a particularly good or useful thing, and I'm not sure how much of that, like, we wouldn't have a relationship with our parents except for this podcast, is super valid. I'm skeptical of that. Again, I don't know for sure. But I'm skeptical of that because, again, like it's not hard to set up time to do something structured with your parents that isn't a podcast. The success of this helps us have a relationship with our parents is not because you're recording it and monetizing it. It is because you're structuring it. So much of what I work with, especially with romantic relationships, is if you want to prioritize something in your life, you have to set aside time for it. Modern late stage capitalism does not care if you are healthy or not. It cares that you are participating in the machine that is productivity so that the ruling class can make money off of your excess labor. The health and wellness industry, again, under like late stage capitalism, isn't a ton better, but like nobody is handing you time to be healthy, right? Maybe if you have good insurance coverage, you get preventative care covered, which means they might pay for your annual physical, some basic medications or checkup type things. And maybe you have a workplace that like gives you a yoga pass for a number of sessions a month or something. But like most people don't have even that, let alone anything else that's, again, like giving them time and space and resources to be able to be healthy and well. And so we just have to carve that time out, like as a practical manner of we're not overthrowing the structures that exist just to live our daily lives and have some baseline health and wellness in our lives. We need to carve that time out. And so if you're prioritizing your relationship, you need to schedule specific time for that. If you're prioritizing the way that you parent with your kids, you need to schedule specific time with that. Like we don't have much free time in the sense that isn't pulled or sucked up somewhere else. And so scheduling is a super beneficial thing that we just don't do a ton of, I think, because most of us are on the verge of burnout and having to schedule even our recreation or our fun or our health or wellness seems like just another task. I hear that, especially as an ADHDer. I'm not a fan. And it's necessary because we have so many forces pulling on us in different directions, asking for our time and energy and resources, that if we don't do that, it doesn't happen. So again, that's sort of like this keeps us having a relationship with our parents is like, well, join a bowling league. And I get it. They don't all live in the same place. I wouldn't want to live in Oklahoma either. So yeah, like get on a Zoom call and don't record it. Do a family book club, do a family movie watch, do something else that isn't platforming really terrible bigotry. So that aside, I think again the podcast could have worked as like a limited series, 3 episodes, 8 episodes, 1 episode every 6 months. That doesn't lead towards a relationship with your parents, but it does keep from sort of like platforming the unhelpful stuff. And with much love in my heart for like Chad and Haley, who again are the kids trying to talk to their parents, this isn't how you deprogram cult behavior. Research shows time and time again that presenting someone with facts and logic that prove their beliefs wrong doesn't get them to change their minds. We're not actually logical creatures. We're fairly emotional creatures. And so where people are likely to change is when they see it affecting their own lives. And so if Chad and Haley wanted to change their parents, not talking to them, setting that boundary of we're not going to give you our time or energy when you behave this way, would be the far more useful thing. That creates an emotional response. The parents are confronted with maybe, if not guilt, at least some cognitive dissonance. I'm like, man, we care about our kids. Why don't our kids want to spend time with us? And again, I think a lot of the boomer generation has either lead poisoning or brain damage of a different sort and are not the most empathetic people where that cognitive dissonance might not do anything. But again, like the approach, if the framing of the necessary conversation is we need to talk about these things as a country, this is how we come together. Like, no, they're doing it wrong. This is if this is you care about your parents and you're doing the best you can, fine. But if you're saying we know and understand that with this platform and the media background, Chad comes from like a line of successful podcasts. He's a media person. If we know with this platform comes some responsibility, then like let's have experts on. Let's have other people talk about this stuff. Let's have family therapists on. Let's have different people approaching this. And like we could record that if that was our actual outcome, which gets me into like some of my skepticism about what is the actual desired outcome here, because I think this progresses to a natural conversation, but I'm sort of rushing through some of my talking points. I think this is the next expression of reality TV. I don't think what is it, Bob and Mary Lou are the elderly generation on this podcast. I don't think they're playing characters. It seems like they are actual MAGA Oklahomans, and like what you would think a MAGA Oklahoman would talk and sound like. Mary Lou has a MAGA hat on, Make America Great Again, red hat. Pretty much every week she wears a cross, but doesn't seem to have any real idea of what's in the Bible. Bob's just like a vile human. Which again, like if I wanted to have a conversation with my parents, if I wanted to have a relationship with them, I don't know that I would like broadcast what terrible people they are. Unless the end game was to be like, and this is why I don't talk to my parents anymore. Here's a voicemail my dad left me, and it's full of bigotry. This is why I don't talk to him anymore. Like, fine, broadcast that. Again, I think like the performative nature of social media is ruining our brains, and not to be like old man yelling at clouds. Like I've softened on some of my anti-podcast in general stances. Honestly, the fact that I have my own probably makes me dislike them even more. But I understand the medium being useful for a lot of folks and the interest there. But yeah, I mean, like this is a successful podcast that platforms really awful talking points. And as much as we push back on media figures, and we should, we being the general population. I think a lot of folks have seen, I mean, certainly the major news corporations are bought up by, again, the capitalist class, the rich oligarchs, the rich douchebags who run things. I mean, CBS putting Barry Weiss in charge of things was like, again, this is a propaganda outlet now. Fox News has long been a propaganda outlet, will continue to be. Some of even the OAN and the more extreme versions, Turning Point USA, the Daily Wire, like the right wing is full propaganda. And we're seeing what little bit of not even left wing, centrist media, NBC, ABC. ABC was always been conservative coded though. I mean, Disney and I mean, Disney's the big one. The CBS, like some of these other things, CNN, are shifting towards like, oh, well, we need to have at least a counterpoint to reality in order to keep those viewers. And again, it's all metrics based, it's all viewership based, as opposed to being like, we reported the news with integrity. It's not journalistic standards, it's like clicks. And so, again, I think we see this normalized, certainly in mainstream media, that like CNN has like just talking head shows now instead of reporting the news. Like, who is their middle-aged white guy they have on who says all the horrific things? But like, they just have a person who's like the right-wing talking point guy. And like, again, in theory, the simplest version of journalism is not to report on like whether people are arguing about the grass is green or blue, but to step outside and look and see whether the grass is green or blue and report that. Like, we have certainly moved into this user on X said this, and this user on Instagram said this, and oh, this person got slammed on. You know, the outrageous headlines that are about nothing, and then they just cite social media quotes as if that's a reliable source of information. But again, like that's BuzzFeed and top 10 lists and all the shitty things from the early internet all grown up. So there's that stuff. And like, again, the journalism and like podcasting isn't journalism. I'm on YouTube right now. I'm not citing sources or particularly interested in writing an APA style paper that can be peer reviewed and published in a scientific journal on this topic. I'm shooting from the hip, confident in my lived experience and expertise on these topics because they're things that I do day in and day out in my daily work that I'm very well trained for. So again, like understanding the medium, but like we platforming people to say shitty things and having no pushback is part of what got us here. Having a necessary conversation with bigoted people is ignoring the part that like the medium plays a part of the messaging, right? That Pat McAfee lets Aaron Rodgers talk about COVID on a show that is ostensibly about sports is part of the context in which misinformation gets spread. Somebody who doesn't have an expertise on a thing is talking from a place of authority from a well-funded platform with no pushback, right? I'm not opposed to having conversation. I think conversation creates possibility. Languaging with another human is how we create mutual understanding. It's great. I'm a talk therapist. I'm in support of communication, even to the point of over communication. But again, the medium in which that communication is happening, the context that surrounds that communication is important. And again, like who's doing it, right? I won my dorm room's Madden tournament in 2007. Hell yeah, I did. Madden 07, the New York Giants. That's how I won that. On my roommate's PlayStation console, which he was mad about that I beat him, even though I was just playing on his console all the time. Shout out to Nick years later here, my college roommate. So I won a Madden tournament. Does that mean that I should go on to Pat McAfee and talk about football and how Aaron Rodgers should play? No, that'd be idiotic, right? Being good at Madden doesn't mean that someone knows more than the professional athlete who plays football for a living. at an incredibly high level, even not at an incredibly high level, right? I love listening to old NBA players talk about like whatever random thing, right? I don't love old NBA players giving analysis on what Giannis should be doing with his life. I love hearing the stories, the camaraderie, the trips from the road, the stuff behind the scenes that you don't see. Jason Williams, famous Sacramento King, Memphis Grizzly. Uh, he played for the Heat for a while too. Jason Williams has been on the podcast circuit, or I don't know if he's been on the podcast circuit or my algorithm is just skewed because I watch Jason Williams clips. But like he talks about after his NBA career playing in China, and like I didn't follow that. I'm not a huge basketball person. And so I didn't know he went over and played in China. He's got a bunch of stories from that. And like that's interesting. I'm interested in hearing people with a high degree of knowledge, what we would call expertise, talk about the thing that they have expertise in. Probably have a competence kink. I like people who do the thing that they're well educated to do at a very high level. And I will listen to them talk about it constantly. I used to love Aaron Rodgers. I used to look forward to Aaron Rodgers on the Pat McAfee show pre-COVID because Aaron Rodgers talked about football. And as a Green Bay Packer fan, I was always interested in what he had to say. And it's fascinating to listen talk about how he ran this play or how he remembers this game playing out or what happened in the timeout or the huddle or whatever. That's all really interesting stuff. Aaron Rodgers talking about COVID is a problem. Aaron Rodgers talking about COVID on the Pat McAfee show is a much, much, much larger problem. Because again, if Aaron Rodgers had talked about COVID while talking to Ken Jennings while they're on a Jeopardy podcast, he would have gotten pushback on his misinformation. But because Pat McAfee is not a real journalist and Pat McAfee is a self-described idiot and proven over and over again to be an actual idiot, he's not able to have that high-level conversation with somebody who's smarter than him. And so there's no pushback. A lot of the Andrew Schultzes of the world, these comedian stand-up bros, Theo Vaughn, the Rogan sort of sphere is the same way. Is like they're not actually smart or well-educated or particularly good at anything. They're just white dudes. And in a sea of white dude mediocrity podcasts, like there's no pushback for people who know a lot more than them. They would be enamored with any senator who came on and explained stuff about Congress because these podcast hosts don't actually know how shit works. In the same way that I could have a car mechanic on and they would talk to me about my car and I would be enamored because I don't know shit about cars, right? Like this is not a competition about who knows the most things about the most topics. This is part of the context of where we get our information from matters. In the necessary conversation, we have two uneducated, I don't know if they went to college or whatever, but uninformed on political goings-ons beyond watching Fox News or OAN or whatever, right-wing TikTok nonsense they follow, talking to two people who are not experts on this stuff. We have it's the blind leading the blind. And so again, that shades this context where, again, one of my specialties is religious trauma, working with people who have left a cult or working with people. I do that mostly. Having worked with a few people who are family members or loved ones or concerned people trying to get someone out of a cult is much more difficult. It's not what you see on TV. It's not the old reality TV show Intervention. It's not the HBO show In Treatment. It's generally a process and it's sort of slow moving and you're trying to get the person who's still in that cult, that belief system, to see how it's negatively impacting them personally, whether that's through the loved ones or whatever. And getting them to feel it, see it, believe it enough that they can shake that initial held belief that has kept them there. And so that's just different than what happens in the necessary conversation. The necessary conversation continues to be adult kids, talking to their parents about like, here's what happened. We have it on tape. How can you not see that? And parents saying, we exist in a different reality than you. That's not what we saw. And or bigotry and or whatever. So there's like, and even not knowing the cult deprogramming, if the kids could say, this is a cognitive bias. Here's how it works. Here's the spotlight effect. This is how it works. This is your brain taking a shortcut. This is skewed thinking. It's not bad or wrong that your brain is doing it, but your brain is misfiring and taking a shortcut that doesn't get it to a correct result, right? Even this is a work religious trauma therapists, not all of us, but a lot of us do as well, is like teaching basic cognitive thinking skills, because basic critical thinking skills and explaining cognitive biases, because religion operates on so many of those things. It's where religion gets its bread and butter, is cognitive biases and lack of critical thinking skills. Why many religions are so anti-science and anti-education, or trying to make education privatized so that they can control it. And so again, even just with like pushback on cognitive biases, even if it wasn't on content, if it was on like, here's what we're thinking. Here's what we're thinking, the young people who are literally minded and are opposed to the state executing people while being recorded or otherwise, but like definitely while being recorded, and versus the people who are pro fascism. So, it's just like ineffective. And I think, again, boundaries have certainly come a long way in the cultural zeitgeist and how mainstream pop culture talks about boundaries. Family estrangement has come up as a topic in some bigger spaces. Oprah, I think, talked about it. Oprah's still like a thing. I don't know. Certainly not the cultural powerhouse that she used to be. Rightfully so. She platformed a shit ton of bad people. If you want to look at any media figure who's probably done more harm to where we are now, I know like Rush Limbaugh certainly comes to mind, and Rupert Murdoch, and was the family who runs Fox. Like, there are people who have probably done worse. I'm not, again, I said at the outset of this episode I was gonna be hyperbolic, but like Oprah's up there. Oprah's up there with like the harm done to our modern society through somebody thinking they were doing good when they were just platforming really terrible, horrible ideas and normalizing them. It has to be Oprah, right? Like Dr. Phil and Dr. Oz, neither of whom are acting doctors. Dr. Phil never was. Should have never been platformed, let alone like having cabinet positions. I guess Dr. Phil's doesn't have a cabinet position, but he's been like in the administration and done a bunch of stuff. So he's gone along on ICE raids and videotaped them. So yeah, like Oprah's up there. I mean, the way that Oprah handled the Satanic Panic was really terrible. The way that Oprah's talked about a lot of stuff. So anyway, I'm not like, hooray, Oprah's talking about it, but just to say it has reached that level of mainstream conversation is family estrangement. And like, I didn't watch it all because, again, I'm of the opinion Oprah's done a lot of harm and doesn't actually know what she's doing. So, and again, with the caveat that like I couldn't host a daytime television show. One, because I don't want to, and two, because like that's not my skill set. I'm not trained in like media or reality TV. I'm trained in mental health, so I could do something about health and wellness. But Oprah, coming from a journalism background and then trying to say I'm a journalist, so this is all above board and viable and like credentialed when she was doing entertainment is again the context that matters there. But the way that family estrangement gets talked about again is still really bad, as like the default status is the way that culture talks about it is the default is you should try and make up with everyone. Family is important, and therefore it is important that you reconcile. And like that's simply not true. First, it's not based on anything. There is no backing to that premise. It's just a thought. And the research doesn't bear it out. The research puts about 28% of people are estranged from at least one family member, whether they're the estranged family member or they just have someone in their family they don't talk to. I don't talk to one of my siblings. It's one out of the four of us. And so, yeah, like somewhere between 25 and 33%, a quarter of people to a third of people have someone in their family they don't talk to. And like, that's just normal. That's the overall statistic. That's regular people, regular family dynamics. The idea that you're going to get along with everybody and be friends forever because you share some genetics is, I think, preposterous. The idea, especially now with, well, the housing market sucks and it is late stage capitalism and societal collapse. So it's not like we have freedom of movement as would be like a human right and would be healthy. But the idea that we don't need to stay in our hometown, we don't need to take over the family business, we don't need to run the family farm. Like we do have a lot more movement to be not around our family, which I think for a long time as a mechanism under capitalism kept the nuclear family as a viable option. But again, like the nuclear family is a made up concept. We as human beings are social creatures and probably do require some level of community. That doesn't need to be people we're related to. Arguably, it would be easier and better and more sustainable to have people who we're aligned with ethically, or have shared interests with. And that often won't be our families, because part of lifetime development is to like grow and change and update your ethics and values. And so the idea that you're going to have 3 generations of people sharing the same ethics is unlikely, because societies change and people change and inside of those societies. So where was I going with that? Oh, so family estrangement has become a viable option, fairly well understood. Boundaries. Family is not who you're related to. This is Jeremy, the therapist, talking. Family is not who you're related to. Family is the people who treat you like family. And that I word it that way because family means different things to different people, right? Different people have different levels of tolerance. Different people have different resources to be able to work through stuff. And so you might be able to joke around and be sarcastic, and that's your family dynamic. And so you like that jokey sort of haha, ribbing each other, back and forth, inside jokes, whatever. You might be somebody who's like really not that, and that doesn't vibe well with you, and you're the middle child and you've never responded well to that. Or, you're the youngest child and you used to be the jokester, but now you've grown up and your dynamic is different. Or you're the golden child, and that led to a lot of burnout and meeting other people's expectations, and people pleasing has exhausted you, and so you don't want to fill that role anymore. So there's lots of, I think, viable reasons to not to be estranged from your family, to not be interacting with them, and certainly to want to update dynamics. And it's hard to change a system. A family is an ecosystem. It's hard to change that system if you're the only person who wants it to change. And so it's certainly a very reasonable, even expected outcome that many people will be estranged from their family in some form or fashion. And so this podcast, as the necessary conversation, where the preferred outcome is like we still have a relationship. I don't even know if it's going to reconciliation at this point. I don't watch it. That's the thing that's crazy about this, is it's just so promoted in the different algorithms that like I see it often, even though I've never subscribed or sat down and tried to listen to a whole episode. So again, I mean, my recommendation to these people who are not my clients and I can't give clinical recommendations to, hypothetically, would be like, yeah, don't give these people any time or energy, right? To Chad and Haley, it would be like, cut them off. Don't deal with them. And that relationship then that you could build from there is perhaps functional, right? Where we can build a fountains together. We can get together for certain holidays. We can get together for family gatherings, with these boundaries in mind. We don't talk about politics. We don't talk about blah, blah, blah. Like, if you say a slur, we're going to leave. We're going to stay at a hotel instead of staying at your house. Like, there's all these scaling mechanisms where we can say, it is important for us to have this relationship because this family dynamic matters. This relationship matters to us. Even though it's flawed, even though it has issues, we're going to work through those by keeping these boundaries in place. But when I watch the show, when I've seen clips and bits and pieces of episodes, it's never that. It's not about boundaries. It's not about functional relationship. It's just like sort of shock jock nonsense. I mean, the parts that get clipped and go viral are like the parents usually saying pretty awful stuff and the kids responding differently. Chad, the son, seems to have a lot more tolerance for it than, like, shockingly, he's a white male. So again, I think like that just comes with a lot of privilege. We're like, right, I'm pretty well resourced at a time of overt fascism and growing authoritarianism in our country, where like, yeah, I can call a bunch of shit out and I have resources and time and energy to tackle some stuff that other people just don't. So I think it makes sense that he's able to tolerate his parents' nonsense more. Like Haley, the daughter, seems pretty close to burnout most of the clips I see her in, and she's not in all of them. So I think she has far less tolerance and is probably closer to just being done with it. But again, I mean, if they're starting from a place of basically being estranged, like there's not enough evidence that the parents are willing to grow or change or respect boundaries to maintain this relationship. This is what I have seen of it is toxic, and normalizing it as these are necessary interactions to deal with your toxic family and hold space for them in your lives. Like, that's harmful. You don't have to hold space for toxic people in your life. Toxic being consistent pattern of harm that is so regular, is so much a pattern that it seems intentional, and that when confronted directly, there's no evidence of any change. There's no evidence of even an effort of change. And again, my definition of toxic is probably different than other people's, but like in my line of work, when people ask me, is this relationship toxic and stuff like that, I try and have insight and a reason, a rationale that I keep relatively consistent as to why I say some things are toxic and some things aren't. It's that pattern. And do we have evidence of movement? Do we have evidence of effort? Because again, movement isn't always immediate. And so sometimes things get worse before they get better. So again, I could see the value of this show if it was 3-4 episodes and then, sort of a coda episode, a finishing episode, a capstone where they say, we tried and it became so detrimental to our mental health and we did not want to platform these people that we had to end it. I also don't love the idea that like the older generation parents, Bob and Mary Lou, just so old timey Oklahoma sounding, are making money off of this. Again, like they're getting rewarded financially then for being just the worst people. Which again, like so did the Kardashians, so did the Margera family, like whatever. Like pick your style of reality TV, and like they're garbage. I think that's Chad's not his only podcast background, but I think he did one on like The Bachelor or something. So again, like the reality TV thing is not far off here. I don't think that's particularly a reach on my part to say this is the modern iteration of reality TV. People thought Jackass was more real than other reality TV. People thought, again, something like Bam Margera show was more real than whatever dating reality TV show was. It was like just as contrived and scripted and nonsense. I don't know that this is scripted, but it's certainly contrived, and it certainly is not doing what it's trying to do. It is existing in sort of its own entertainment ecosystem now, in a self-perpetuating cycle, because it does well on the algorithm and is enough to be monetized, where they're going to keep doing it because it becomes part of their income. So that sucks. And I hold space for, again, like it's tough out there. If you can make money while you can, and then get out, right? And like that's my issue, I guess, with the show, is like it hasn't ended. Where now it's perpetuating harm. It's normalizing and platforming really terrible ideas. And it's harmful in that like this isn't how we respond to those things. It's normalizing abusive dynamics instead of working to change them. So it's unnecessary to continue the Necessary Conversation podcast. And again, I don't know the people at all who run it. I'm not a regular consumer of the show or viewer of the show. It's just like in my line of work, I rarely see good portrayals of healthy boundary setting. I rarely see family dynamics that are good and things that I want to espouse. Usually on YouTube, I'm reviewing things, and I'm pretty critical of most things because, again, like shockingly, we just don't have that many good examples of healthy relationships. And like, right, because we're not a healthy society. So why would that be normalized? And it's not interesting. It's not action or drama. There's no tension in storytelling if there's not a problem to overcome. So good, healthy dynamics are boring in their mundane healthiness. It's like watching a plant grow. And so, yeah, I mean, that just isn't rewarded in our society. So again, I my initial hyperbole brain was like the worst podcast out there. But that's certainly not true, right? Like I named a bunch of right-wing talking heads that I think are significantly worse and doing overt, like objective harm, right? Like, so this is very, 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 very low. But I think as far as like left-leaning podcasts, this one is one of my least favorite. The ones that I think liberals watch, the ones that clients of mine who are survivors of religious trauma will watch, because for a while it validates their experience trying to talk to their parents. And then it becomes harmful very quickly and they stop watching. And I think that's correct. Again, I think that's sort of where the show exists, as it was a useful guide for a handful of episodes, and it has far outlived that utility to the point now where it becomes harmful. So don't watch it. And I'm not like a huge podcast guy, so I can't be like, listen to these instead. Like my stuff is depressing in a different way. That I listen to, I listen to Weird Little Guys. It's probably my favorite podcast. It's about neo-Nazis and the myth of the lone wolf. And it's really interesting for my brain in particular. But again, like I was a weird little kid who grew up on serial killer books and stuff, documentaries. So I like that stuff. Behind the Bastards, a lot of those sort of looking at how and why people come to do terrible things. And like, again, I'm a therapist, so some therapy stuff. I listen to Friendly Atheist Podcast, which is just sort of like the news of the week for what churches and church people have been doing that's bad. And it's enough that there's an hour and a half episode every single week, even without doing like which pastor is a predator. They don't even cover that anymore because it happens so frequently. So again, like I don't have like, hey, these podcasts rock and are healthy. Like I think all of those could be bad for people's mental health if they're not well resourced. My wife listens to murder mystery podcasts, and I generally refer to those as like trauma porn. And that doesn't mean they're not interesting or entertaining in the same way that like Behind the Bastards is interesting and entertaining. It's just there's a certain vibe to the way they're sort of done as entertainment that I think is like. I said I had softened on my anti-podcast stance, but as I talk about it here for you, we see that it's pretty much still right there. I don't want to be old man yelling at clouds, so I know podcasts aren't going anywhere. But like, yeah, there's certainly problems with the medium, and certainly too many celebrities have podcasts now. That the podcast is just that they're a celebrity and they have friends who are celebrities, so they get together and chat. And like, again, the attack on our education system and the anti-expert bend towards authoritarianism is intentional in the right-wing political sphere and is one of our party's anti-education as part of their political platform. But like some of the shit that's out there for our regular mass consumption that is not overtly vile or evil is making us dumber too, for sure. So yeah. I don't have recommendations for better podcasts to listen to. My recommendation is whatever else you're listening to, listen to more of it and drop this one from the regular rotation. It needs to come to an end. Ta-da! Those are my thoughts on that. It's like I don't know. It's getting there's feedback or pushback. It's not outrage or anything, but it comes up often enough in some of the therapy groups that I'm a part of that I thought I would chime in and talk about that. If there's something you want me to do a review of, talk about the mental health in, drop down in the comments, let me know. I'm for those of you who are paying attention, I like to do song reviews, but the YouTube algorithm is really brutal on copyright laws and some of that stuff. So while I think that's probably where I have the most fun in responding to content and mental health, it is also the thing that gets buried the hardest. So, but yeah, you can still do songs. I should probably, for my own sanity, do some things that aren't so dreary and political. It's just this a politics of anti-wellness in our current moment, where being healthy and well is hard. So, I appreciate you joining me here and hanging out for a bit. Like, subscribe, do all those YouTubey things, helps people find my work, which is cool. If we can get 5 more people to watch me instead of listen to Joe Rogan, we're making the world a better place. With that, as always, take care of yourself, take care of somebody else. Peace.